I have Fred's permission to do this. I didn't read at the open mic, so I'm actually gonna read a couple of Fred's poems with his permission, already given, I mean. And the reason I'm going to read the first poem is that I think it captures a lot of what you should know about Fred as a person and a poet. It's called First Song Again. That was somewhere on me. First Song Again. Trust all the wood you stand on, become an ally of the grain, bend in the wind. Trust even the high precarious places, the steeples and the windy overhangs that teach you everything. Trust too the rose tint of late afternoon, sifting down through a lofted blue heron wing. Trust above all the imminent return of the small but persistent impulse to sing. So come on in. That was Fred's poem, by the way. And what all of that has to do is with some kind of singularly interesting things about Fred Marchant as a person, as well as a poet. This slightly surprising impulse to sing is what impelled his writing life. He began as a numbers person. He was about to major in physics when, I think it was Dante. Was it Dante?
Close, yeah. Visited me. No. No, it was Dante.
It was Dante. Reading Dante suddenly switched him 180 degrees, and he decided to major in literature, which he did at Brown University in Providence, where he grew up. And then he got a PhD from the University of Chicago's Committee on Social Thought. So those are two very important features of the man you're going to hear tonight. There is about his work that, I mean, he's reading a lot of new poems, and I suspect he hasn't changed a whole lot, but what I've read makes me understand that there's a trust. He trusts the world in a way that he trusts it to treat a fair-minded and gentle person fairly. And I'll say more about that as I go on. He risks going to high places, these high precarious places. I'll just tell you right off the bat, and then I'll talk a little bit about this more later. He was the first Marine to be discharged honorably from the Marines. This was in the Vietnam era. Fred went through boot camp and all of that, and then on Okinawa, someplace, decided this was not for him. So he persuaded those Marines to give him an honorable discharge, first person ever. He was a conscientious objector, and I'm gonna focus on that a little bit because he's done a lot of work with that kind of feeling inside himself. And the other thing is that he has this rose tint, trust the rose tint of late afternoon. He's also someone who's able to see beauty in raw circumstances, like war, preparation for war, and the deaths of those who are near to him. And I think I've asked him to read one poem that I think makes that clear. He's many, many things. He's an editor, to start with. He was taught by William Stafford, whom he adores, I think, would be a fair way to put it. And he edited a book called The Early Poems of William Stafford. And to hear him lecture on William Stafford is an absolute enchantment. I know him because he taught at the Frost Place at the advanced seminar, and his required talk there was on William Stafford. Everybody was in love with William Stafford when he finished. He is a teacher. he either is or isn't currently a professor of English. He says this, a director of creative writing program at Suffolk University, a program he initiated, developed there. He has taught at UMass Boston's William Joyner Center for the Study of War and Social Consequences. He was a teaching affiliate there. And as I said, he's taught at the Frost Place. He's a poet. He has published 4 volumes of his own poetry, the earliest one in 1993, a couple of years before he founded this poetry center, called The Tipping Point, which was the winner of the Washington Prize in Poetry, Washington, D.C. Prize in Poetry. In 2000, 7 years later, we don't know what happened in those intervening years, but he published a book called Full Moon Boat, which is beautiful, and which I think is out there. Yeah. He published in 2002 a book of new and selected poems entitled House on Water, House in Air. I can already tell that's going to be an interesting one. And then his most recent book, The Looking House, published in 2009, has been ballyhooed all over the place. He got, the Barnes & Noble Review put it as one of the 5 best books of poetry in 2009. The San Francisco Chronicle, I didn't drink anything, one of the 10 best collections of poetry. Massachusetts Book Award as one of 2009's must-reads. And then the 2009 May Sarton Award for the New England Poetry Club for poets whose work is an inspiration to other poets. So all kinds of points of view are celebrating this man. So why? Why all this honoring? Why all this? How does all this fit together? And I think I want to talk to you a little bit about him as a conscientious objector and what has come out of that. It's in his poetry. You'll see it there, along with a wealth of other kinds of things. But in that spirit, he has gone on to recently to spend 2 months in Israel and Palestine with the Interfaith Peace Builders, and learned what he called the labor of peace building. Not easy. And he has written with the Veterans Writing Group in Sebastopol, California. And in 2006, he published, as a co-translator, a book of poetry by a Vietnamese poet, Tran Dang Qua, is that right? Called From a Corner of My Yard. And he said this young poet must be read. He's just wonderful. And that Fred was able to avoid being in country during the war and come back full circle to translate the work of a Vietnamese poet, he said has completed a circle in his life. I love that about Fred. He said, it had the feel of a large circle being closed, I'm quoting him now, and made myself made whole. So, he's been called by a literary critic, Jeanette Curry, the creator of a new anti-war poetics out of seemingly disparate subjects and images, and I hope that will be something of what you do tonight. And what I want to say is that what his poetry does is to offer protest against the machinery and effects of war, but in a clear and quiet voice that asks us to look at the pictures and ideas he offers without fear of being scolded or being issued a challenge we can't meet. It's unusual in that genre, I think. And he said I could read this poem, which is an illustration of that, I think. This is called Brasso, and it's in The Looking House. Sweet waxy smell, and the opaque film it dries to. Here is a tissue wrapped around the thumb, and here the coal-black residue it lifts as if from the watery depth of a tarn. It is and is what it should be, as neutral as a crease, as certain as a salute, as true as the alignment of buckle with shirt buttons and fly. And here are boots under a slow circular finger and spit. Here too, a mindless attention standing for hours at the rack, skivvies billowing out whitely. People will die because of you, your mistakes. So says the sergeant under arms. So says my face, memorizing orders in tiny mirrors of brass. So says my feet at 45 degrees. So says my chin tucked in. And my thumbs at the seams, if flesh ever had a seam. So says my torso to the green footlocker with my effects designated personal. And so says that box back to me as I note that without a tray, it is large enough for a child to be buried in. Last things I want to say by way of introduction are a couple of things he has said that I want you all to hear. His wish for the effect of a poem is that each poem offer itself as a rough shelter from which one could look out and see the reality of things, especially those realities that make you want to flinch and turn away. It's such a beautiful notion for what a poem can do. And then the last thing is his lesson, as quoted from him, that he took from William Stafford, and I'm saying this to every poet in this room. What was important to Fred about what he learned from Stafford was this: Stafford's sense of writing as a process of discovery, his sense of the importance of writing daily, and his sense that if stuck, one could lower his standards and keep writing. So, no lowered standards in this presentation. Fred Marchant.
Wouldn't you like to have your poems read by Ned? You know, maybe Ned, you could fill in. I'll just point to a page, and thank you so much for the introduction and for the reading of those poems. I got a lot of gear up here, so forgive me, but I'm at the good end of a bad cold, and so I may have to rush over here, and resupply halfway through. But I'm not sick. I mean, not that kind of sick. All right, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Guilford Poets. Thank you so much. It is really a beautiful gallery, and it is wonderful to be in the middle of the street. And how are we doing for the noise, all right?
Yeah.
Everybody can hear me? Good. I was talking to a really tough-minded television producer yesterday. I'm going to have a retirement party. That was that in my teaching right now. I'm going to retire. There's going to be a retirement party. He's a friend, and he's going to film it. And he wanted to know what the hell it was about. What's the theme of it, And I hadn't thought it through yet, But at one point in the conversation, I said something like, well, poets, they camp out at the boundary of things that are impossible to say. That's where they set up shop and they go to work at trying to open that space a little bit more. And I was pretty proud of saying that to him, actually. And then I realized it was old hat. I had already said it before. It was just their variation on a theme. But it is a sense of things I have. It is William Stafford's centennial. He was born in 1914. And so in that spirit, I am going to read at least one poem from that book that I edited of his, and we'll just invoke his spirit. The book's called Another World Instead, and it's the early poetry of William Stafford. But these are poems that he wrote between 1937 and 1947, and there are about 160 plus poems in this book, and only a dozen of them had ever been published. They were mostly sort of in the archives just there. Some are practiced, and some are extraordinarily accomplished. And he's not always the avuncular sweetheart of a poet that you might think. And so I'm going to read a poem that is probably, in my sense of things, and see what you think, it's really a gnarly poem. It's difficult, and kind of uncompromising. He was a conscientious objector during World War II. The center of this book are the poems that he wrote in civilian public service as a CO during World War II. And most of that time, he was up in the various mountain ranges of the far west. And this poem was written on December 23rd, 1942. It's called CO's Work on Mountain Road. Like bay trees on the edge of La Cumbre Peak, liking with wistful scent the swooping world below, we few dreamers, on the edge of new savage ears, jagged beyond sight, audaciously lean, suspiring a few old messages from the old earth still under our trustful feet. The pines have left us and are marching. The sycamores fly angry tints. The oaks present overworked postures, extreme. Who cares in a big country for a few egret trees on one cliff, on an edge, leaning far out, on a scent like a memory? Well, it's a poem that I just want to offer to you as being terrifically engaged at that place that I was talking about. It's sort of on the edge of what, I don't know what the poem is about, I just know that he's trying to grapple what it meant to have decided that he would not participate in the good war, if you will. And he has this sense, these trees, they're just, sending out their scent out over the valley. And I think that his instinct is something that's kind of what it must be like. That's the work he was doing, is trying to, if he were here, I'd tease him, he's trying to smell good, or trying to give a perfume to the war-torn land. Oh yeah, let's see what time it is. Good. We okay? Good. Well, you have. When you have a lot of gear, it takes a while to get settled in, And so I'm going to read mostly new poems, but I've got a couple of surprises from The Looking House as well. This is a new book of poetry that I've been working very diligently on for quite a while. That is to say, all my life, no doubt, but really in the last 6 or 9 months, with just a kind of craziness. And I'm so happy about that. It's so rare that that's been in my life. My life has been scattered in so many places. And I feel like that it was such a blessing to have this unbelievably sustained commitment. So I think that's what I'll do. I'll give you a sample of that. And then I'll sneak in some surprises. Now here we are in a beautiful gallery. So I'm going to tell you about the opening poem in this book is called Ivory Bull Dancer. And in Heraklion in Crete, there's a sculpture about this long of a human torso that's from Knossos. It's from somewhere, 1500 BCE, and it's ivory. It's worm-eaten, but it's still, shaped like a human torso. It's a guy, although you can't see exactly why, but it's pretty clear it's a guy. And I have to do this, right? So it's hung on 2 wires, and it's like this. The body is like this. And it is, all the archaeologists say, it's an image of one of those young men who would leap over the horns of a bull. Ivory Bull Dancer. In Minoa, his hands grip 2 invisible horns to leap the furious eye of our desire to kill and be killed. Over our origins in strewn rubble, children bewildered and wards locked. Over medicines of sledge and shock, the therapies of iron hammers, over the never to be forgotten, even in the striking down. over the unsaid word, the venom coiled inside, over rump and pelt and dust, his feet land, touch, so that we do not forget what we do here. I'm sure my voice is distracting you. I apologize. That frog is really... I should have a frog poem tonight. I don't know why I didn't write it. Damn, I wish I had remembered that. I do have a frog poem, but it's not in this book. It's actually about tree frogs in Vietnam and how exquisitely strong they are in their voices. Psalm. So why bother with it? Let it go, this business of deciding if or how long a string of words should take to stretch across the page and float around as if weightless, or reach down like a priest who will listen to your woes and tell you all is forgiven and will be okay. This is not a matter to preoccupy a grown-up. Excuse me, I'll have to say that again. This is not a matter to preoccupy a grown-up, you say. Not anyone who votes or is head of household. Nor is it a question for today. Not after you've fitted your car into the funeral lineup, followed the purple fender flags that lead to an open grave where it is revealed that inches down in Woodbridge, New Jersey, hide red clay minerals, a ruddiness to study, while workmen, gloves sticking out of their pockets, tried to hook straps to the coffin liner and whisper as they slide the cover into place, attending to the precise moment the lips fit the seal true. This allows the rabbi to finish saying Kaddish, which leads him to quote from the poet, meaning, I think, the psalmist, whose long and multiple clauses struggle like an infant in the arms of its mother. The opening line of this is not a joke, okay? The poem's not even funny. But given the context, you're going to laugh, so feel free. This poem is called The Unacceptable. It's in 4 parts. 1. How do you write about a cough? How to hint at the sound of it, the kind of cough that is odd. Not the cold of the month or the flu, but a cough that won't stop, that lasts all through the funeral and serves in place of the panic or woe beyond words. A tickle that makes the nerves seize up, puts you on the edge of gagging, though that is too hard on everyone near. And so the stomach tightens and your neck firms up, scraping for air, pushing it over the fleshy brim, panic on hold. Whatever it was that had begun to eat away at my sister's mind, I knew it was there when our grandfather died, and she couldn't stop coughing throughout the Mass. I was young enough to feel betrayed by a world that had me make room for the dead, and her cough felt like insult added. Though I hated her for it, I hated the cough even more. The body, unable to stop announcing its presence there, and unwilling to let the soul just drift away. Now I realize something else has gripped her by the throat, something worse than a shred she needed to dislodge. No thought or intent attached to the thing directly. It was mute, more a silent dredge, a broad metal chain dragged across the floor of her being. cough giving way over time to shattered mind, her feelings like a comet's tail, rocks and ice, visitors and voices, all racing across the night, an innocence in her, harm to self and others. 4. Her last day on the planet, she thrashed and spit. Weary nurses tied her to the bed rail with cloth strips, and so she panicked more, her face flush with radiant energy from the struggle with these she would learn never to trust. Her ward was hell, her devils in green scrubs, with a screen monitor for the pulse of her finger, machines that breathed a beige, wheezing apparatus of the unacceptable, the hard labor in our smiles, our soothing words, we the good demons, holding her hand until the end. Well, I'm going to ask, this is a quiz now. It's another poem about my sister, and it's going back in time, back into her life, early on. And who here knows of a musician by the name of Slim Gaillard, or Gaylord sometimes? You know Slim Gaillard. Yes, good. Anyone else? What's his most famous song? Do you remember? He did humorous songs. And, yeah. He was a virtuosic musician. He could play the piano this way. No, I'm not kidding. You can see it on YouTube. You can YouTube it. He was a guitarist, as well as a keyboard player. He composed songs that, he composed them with his own scat vocabulary. He called it Voot, V-O-U-T. Yeah, and there's a dictionary. I don't know, I've never seen the whole dictionary, but there are pages of it you can see if you Google it. His most famous song was a song that my sister sang to me as a boy, and she was a young woman. It was Cement Mixer, Putty Putty. This is called Halfway Houses. By the way, Slim makes an appearance in On the Road. And Jack Kerouac, I was reading this poem a week or two ago, and a friend of mine has a son. He's a Swede, but he knows all about American culture. And so I said about Slim Gaillard. He said, "Oh yeah, that's on page such and such in On the Road." Sure as hell, that's right. I'm going to put it as an epigraph, that line. Something like Slim leaned against the wall overlooking the crowd or something like that. It's not bad. However, we'll do without that tonight. Halfway Houses. I helped her board the window, spit in the dresser, and shut the gate. She, the legatee, "This is this" tattoo on her arm. Glazed rose to look down and glimpse sky burial, mournful pines, her own wandering mind. It was always the burdock to welcome her back, with hints of love and lower organism, moss, algae. She was always wet with tears she'd yet to shed. Then she was back out to sea, a ferry taking on water. She lived out the rest of her stints beyond salvation, 4 beds to a room, variable maids, a stand-up tub to shower in, shallow sink, the remnants of easy chairs, linoleum halls, flowers pasted on the wire windows. Asylum, refuge, and sanctuary of peeling paints, with oak that brushed against the window all night. A group sing in the AM, a volunteer at the piano. Cement mixer, putty putty. Cement mixer, putty putty. Poodle da scooty, poodle da scooty, poodle da scooty. Concrete. I really can't believe the poems I chose tonight. I can't believe that it's so unconscious. This poem is called A Bone in the Throat. It's not a funny poem either. Well, it must have been on my mind, I guess. That is funny. A bone in the throat. Imagine a fish bone lodged in your throat. Imagine the fish bone kicks and squirms. You cough, you hack, You try to heave it out. As you are human, you adapt. You learn how to speak, eat, sleep, work, and dream with this thing within. You read stories of tumors the size of grapefruits, but you are not consoled by such reports of massive deformity worldwide. Your children seem to inherit the problem, though you know the issue is not genetic. Periodically, there is a violent physical reaction, a rejection, but nothing changes. In the early hours, just after your prayer, and before water has cleared the eyes, as you do to discern meaning in the situation, you feel the bones stirring, again, as if transformed into a dog you've awakened and will give birth to. You do not marvel anymore at such transformations, from cell to cyst to cancer or dog. And suddenly, all the neighborhood dogs are barking, as if they alone knew the trials and dangers that await you. The noise drives you to your child's bedside. For some indecipherable reason, she has just stopped breathing. Now what do you do? Check and see where we are. Good. You all know the George O'Keeffe. I mean, I'm sure you have some George O'Keeffe somewhere floating in your mind. There's that one called Ram's Head, Hollyhock, and Red Hills. You know, there's the skull and Hollyhock, and then there's this. Okay. This is at the end of it. If you were reading it, you'd see it's set for April 15th last year. It's Boston Marathon Day. So Ram's Head, Hollyhock. Also, I'll show you this. I'm so proud of this in my own way, but I'm going to have to say the words. It doesn't work if I've already tried reading this poem. But it's got ditto marks under the word the way. It's going to get a bit oppressive, however, if I just two extra long silences every couplet. So, Ram's Head, Hollyhock, Little Hills, the way. A horn will curve like a flower, petals layering a flute. The way a bone can be made to sing, song hiding in the hollows. The way Robert says the poem is only a column of air and sadness. The way the flower floats beside the horn, dwarf sun in midair. The way brown earth and red earth too listen and seem to approve. The way clouds stretch out like fingers of this lord or that. The way the helicopter hovers above the crime. The night sun on the runners. You should know that that phrase "night sun" is a technical phrase. It's the technical name for those lights that helicopters, when the helicopters are trying to track people, that's what that's called, the night sun. This is another poem out of the same, not that same time, but all of the terrible things that we've been privy to. E pluribus animus. One soul sits weeping on the seawall, a hero wishing to flee the enchantment. Dog soul stands guard, swivel-headed, guarding the bony idea of the enemy. Good finger soul twitches as it labors to keep the chambers oiled and clean. Soothed soul wipes the gauzy swaths and circles of comfort on the metal blued. Prickly wire brush soul scrubs it free from the stray carbon flecks of the past. Hand soul weighs the weapon, marvels at its simplicity, its service, its perfect fit. I'll really do a happier poem. I'll do an analogy of some sort. Well, actually, it's a strange way it is. This is not that, but I was over supper. I was telling Nan and others that about a poet I had just discovered. Poet's been around a long time, but I had just started to read this past fall. A woman named Adélia Prado. She writes in Portuguese. She's Brazilian, and I read her book Ex Voto, translated by Ellen Doré Watson, in September, shortly after Sheamus passed away. And I was close to Sheamus and so forth, and so I wrote an elegy. And it's called Fennel. And there's an epigraph from Adélia Prado. Fennel. The soul, yes, was murky, and no one could see it. Adélia Prado. Something of the fog has burned off. Something in the high oaks and behind the sounds of hammers, ignitions, a shift outward, a quick, long view to the sliver of the largest bay there is. A morning of pinion and stridor. Of course, you were not one who was for the high air and only remote. You were for the light on the table, the red gate that needed to be shut, the irritable dog that hears the world too much, the scruffy, fledgling robin that lands on the trellis, sizes me up in the way of its kind, and decides I am all right. Just more evidence of oddity found among the breathing. At the end, maybe you were thinking of Whitman and his claim that dying was luckier than we had supposed. Or not. Or not. Each of us a bee that hovers over a newly fallen leaf. How lovely the flower, I do not know. And where do I enter? I remember cresting the ancient hill at Duncanely, seeing a blue caravan in the pasture corner and thinking, this is all I will ever know of the soul. The grass uncut, a land arm stretching out to the south. I touch it again here, in the braille of small yellow blooms I rub between my fingers, pass under my nose, while a snail, with its horns of light, works its way down the stem. Now, this is not in the poem. And believe me, if I could figure out a way to get it in there, I would. But you should know, this doesn't matter. I was so tickled to learn that among the many, many amazing dimensions of Fennel is that in ancient Greece, when Prometheus stole fire from the gods, he snuck it out in the hollow stalk of a fennel. Isn't that wonderful? Sheamus would love that. I know he would love it. And I could hear him say, why couldn't you get that in the damn poem? But I couldn't. And then I learned that it's also great medieval, it's a great healer. There's lots of herb charms that have to do with it. This one's by special request, but it's a real pleasure, to read this poem, which is also an elegy. And I thought, well, if I'm going to read the Sheamus poem, and this poem, Nan had asked me if I would consider reading it, I thought, that'd make a nice pair. It's for my father. It's called Ball-Peen Hammer. He lay sideways on the bed. Excuse me, I'll start again in a minute. Ball-peen hammer. You know what a ball-peen hammer looks like, right? That's it? Yeah, good. ball-peen hammer. He lay sideways on the bed, the flimsy curtains on their runners stirring, when the nurses rushed by. They did not plan to admit him, meaning he would die here soon. I leaned on the bed rail and watched his breath enter and leave. It seemed easy. But he was in a coma, so who could say? I dabbed at his parched lips with a swab until a nurse gave me a grape popsicle. Keep an eye on it. No telling how long it would be. No telling if he knew I was doing this. But I'm sure how good it tasted. I rested the ice on his tongue, but I held the weight off, balanced it in my hand. I remembered a ball-peen hammer, a miniature, the size of a popsicle, my favorite of all his tools. There was no claw at the back, but round steel for peening, the shaping and smoothing of metal. That's how I wanted his minutes to pass. No thrash or heave, just a steady tapping away until done. I'm going to ask how are we doing for time, and I really need to know. You know, I have 10 minutes after, and I started around 10 of. Does that sound right? So I'll do 3 more poems.
You can go all night.
Who said that? Yes. You are correct, sir.
I bet you can.
I'm getting rid of the frog, you know. Come on. Thanks. Well, what I have in mind here is I would like to read. What I did is I read the opening poems of this book, and then I've gone to the end of it, and sort of that's what I was thinking of, you know, as my sort of plan for the night was to sort of, you know, do the opening. Oh, there is one little poem I think I should read. Now that I saw it on the list, I forgot it. I don't do a lot of Vietnamese translation, but this one I'm very proud of. It's a couplet, and it's by a friend of mine by the name of Vo Quay. He lives in Way City. He's a musician mostly, but I've translated some of. It's more than a couplet, but it's in English. It's more than a couplet, but he's a really remarkable musician and tenor voice singer, and for some reason I just could never get this poem out of my mind, so I offer it to you in this spirit. It's called Peach by Vo Quay, and it's co-translated, as I always do, with my friend Nguyen Bach Chung. Peach. Overnight, a bat has eaten half a peach. The rest has fallen to the sad earth. For you, I leave a portion of happiness. For me, I keep my share of sorrow. Isn't that beautiful? God bless him. Well, in the same vein, the next poem in that middle part of the book is called Crossing Windsor Street. Windsor is the great epic poet of Vietnamese literature. He wrote, in the 18th century, wrote a long epic about Q, A Tale of Q, K-I-E-U. And Windsor Street is, well, it's a major thoroughfare in Hanoi. Crossing Windsor Street. Advice we had was to just step right out, like wading in a stream. Motorbikes, hundreds of them, would find a way around us. We must not be hesitant, for that would throw off everyone. So, trusting these, our friends, here on the street, named for the poet of Q, we leaned into the traffic as if it were only a light wind flowing round our faces. At that instant, we tried to imagine a world utterly merciful and belonging to those few who, as they passed smiling, looked as if they just might forgive us. Anyway, what I was saying is that I wanted to go toward the end of this book because I want to sort of give you a sense of the scope of it. It begins in that dimension of unacceptable and finds more and more dimensions of the unacceptable, put it that way. But, you know, in the process, you know, they don't go away, and so you don't quite make your peace with them, but I guess you learn to live with them. Yeah. This is called The Name of the Painting, and it's on Titian's Europa, as it says in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, also called, however, by everyone, The Rape of Europa. The name of the painting, Titian's great painting. And it's in 3 parts. Excuse me, it's in 4 parts, but 3 major parts. 1. The docent avoids the word rape, as does the museum. How delicate this diction, though. She does say the work is a tornado of unfinished diagonals in an unfinished story, thus violating the boundaries of frame and inventing the modern. A pair of cupids fly above Europa with arrows, another one below riding a scaly fish, staring up her loosely draped skirt. Sisters of the princess back on the dim shores of Sidon are either waving or pleading while she holds on for dear life. 2. Her right hand on the red flowing scarf that Ovid mentions. Her other grips the chalky horn. Docent says this is a sign, without doubt, of ambivalence. Book says the word rape is kin to rapture. The wild flowing, a scarf, Titian's sign of it. If, though you look the wrong way, the scarf is like the horn, another thing taking this girl away. The fear palpable as her fleshy thighs, the exposure of which is the center of this painting. Like the cupids, like the fish, like the bull itself, we eye her where she is naked. No, I'm wrong about the bull. Maybe it is as frightened as she is, its body inhabited by a god, a woman thrashing on its back. At first the animal had stepped through shallows of the beach, wondering why it was here. Then it had let her splash seawater on its flanks, lean on its back. She was lighter than a feather, and when the urge suddenly came and it turned seaward, the bull might have felt in some strange way it was saving her. Now she is with me in the Gardner, while I make notes and realize I am writing again about my sister, how her madness descended or lifted her up, how it came up from underneath and seemed her friend and lover as it took her away. And when she knew it was to be forever, she looked back, her eyes turning into dots of terror, the waters growing deeper, greener, colder, washing her ashore into the jerry chair, day room, where the whiteboard says, today is. No matter the docent, no matter the outcome, no matter the god, no matter the name of the painting, what could it be if not rape? Fresh ink. Some of you may know that was the name of a really great exhibition at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts a couple of years ago, in which contemporary, Chinese mostly, but contemporary Asian painters were given free rein to go look at some of the unexhibited classic Asian paintings that the museum had collected over the centuries, and then do something in response. So that was the Fresh Ink. It's such a great title, isn't it? And anyway, this is a poetry version of that, Fresh Ink. The museum like a dream, and the dreams later like the museum. Dragons and trees and clouds in the corners and under the open-air platform where 5 scholars sit reading, collating texts that messengers on horsebacks have brought from afar. Scrolls unwound by servants whose brows, painted white, denoted dignity in their work. The horses, weary and unfettered, are calm. Calm as the sages who bend down and read again and pass on, the text annotated, new lines added to a poem with fresh ink, a smell, sweet and dark, slightly metallic, an ink like a purple flower. The attendants in this dream hold out the scroll. support it with arms extended, the ache nothing compared to their need to judge and save, the scholar's desire to set in place what will be needed for those who will come later, to get right these word shapes, this history that arrives straight from the provinces, tied in bundles like thick sheaves of grain, the half-tilled field of their origins visible just beyond, and workers, weary with their pains taken, a young man and his beloved sleeping in the sun, not quite in each other's arms, but close enough for them to remember they are together, even in a dream, while under the pavilion, the painter, whose gaze knows the story beginning to end, now must decide which of these lines is an eyelash and which the trembling of his hand. I'll end on this. First question. Scent of sage and thyme, shade laurel, brown goats that turn back and stare. Lord, what took you so long?